Welcome to another episode of Michigan's premier progressive podcast. It's Left of Lansing with Pat Johnston. A progressive and populist insight into Michigan's political and cultural world. And of course, an entertaining show on how to make Michigan's political machine work for the people, and not just the elite few. Now, from the Left of Lansing headquarters from his mid-Michigan attic, it's time for the award-winning Pat Johnston. It's all yours, Pat.
Yeah! Welcome to another installment of Michigan's premier progressive podcast. I am Pat Johnston, and I just need to play this clip again from Michigan Democratic Congresswoman and the corporate establishment party pick for the state's open U.S. Senate seat. Yes, Miss AIPAC, Haley Stevens. It's gone viral, and I played it here before, but I've got to share it with you again, just in case you haven't seen or heard it.
I will continue to fight for the people of Israel. I will continue to fight for Israel's existence. Israel comes to me in my dreams. I see Israel's future, and I know that Israel will continue to exist for the Jewish people.
Yes, that was Haley Stevens at a Hanukkah ceremony in Detroit a few years ago, saying that she sees Israel in her dreams. Look, Israel is here and here to stay and is bankrolled by billions and billions of dollars by the United States of America. A good portion of both Republican and Democratic representatives in Congress are throwing more money and more ammo to Israel, despite a majority of the country saying that must end, that it must stop, and stop now. Some 60% of U.S. adults have a negative opinion of Israel, according to a Pew Research poll last month. Nearly 60% of U.S. adults have a negative opinion of Israel's warmongering and war criminal leader, Benjamin Netanyahu. And now a majority of Democrats and MAGA Republicans under the age of 50 have a negative opinion of Israel's right-wing government. This is telling. It really is telling as the Iran war goes on. Dear Leader sent out all kinds of social media posts over the Memorial Day holiday weekend, teasing us that some grand deal was close and that the Iran war would soon be over. But Israel Netanyahu's people said, not so fast, and there is no deal. I've wondered if Dear Leader really wants an exit out of this war that's accomplished virtually nothing, other than costing us over $90 billion by now, and that's according to the Iran War Tracker, not to mention 13 dead service members and several others wounded. Meanwhile, the so-called negotiations are bogged down, and Israel continues bombing and killing Palestinians in Gaza and killing people in Lebanon. Gas prices remain over $4 a gallon, while the Trump regime at the same time is killing or at least decimating clean energy projects across the state and the country, since diversifying our energy portfolio would only make sense. Yet there's Haley Stevens pledging her undying support for a foreign government, saying that she sees it in her dreams. And then there's this. Many of us are getting hit with these pro-Haley Stevens ads throughout Michigan, falsely saying that she's a fighter against ICE. As reported by Steve Niebling of the Detroit Metro Times recently, the group who paid for these TV ads is called the Center for Democratic Priorities Incorporated, and they placed the ad buy in Detroit, Grand Rapids, Flint, Lansing, and the Traverse City media markets. Niebling's article continues saying the ad campaign comes days after the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, AIPAC, sent fundraising emails promoting Stevens and Republican U.S. Senator Susan Collins of Maine, while attacking Haley Stevens' main opponent in the Democratic primary race, that's Dr. Abdullah Syed, and also attacking Graham Plattner, that's Susan Collins' Democratic challenger. The Center for Democratic Priorities bought the airtime through Waterfront Strategies, a media buying firm that has worked with AIPAC-affiliated super PACs, including United Democracy Project. So, Haley Stevens is trailing in the polls and was recently booed heavily, mind you, at the Michigan Democratic Party nominating convention. She doesn't go out and barnstorm the state with some game-winning working-class message, does she? No. She doesn't electrify the crowds to galvanize the working class. and galvanize working class voters to her side. She doesn't try to do that. And that's a real criticism, by the way, because I wish that Haley Stevens got into politics, got into the game to serve working class interests in Michigan. And then there's this from the Detroit News' Grant Schwab and Melissa Nan Burke. In a story titled, Pro-Israel PAC Uses Loophole to Quietly Fund Stevens in Dem Primary, we get confirmation how a prominent pro-Israel political group is responsible for a large portion of Haley Stevens' donor base. And here's the kicker. Despite this being known, AIPAC isn't showing up by name in public disclosures. The story says, as of right now, AIPAC officially hasn't given any money in this Democratic Senate race. But just digging a little deeper, the Detroit News says AIPAC has instead found less detectable ways to back Stevens. As the story continues to say that while an exact dollar amount flowing to Stevens isn't available, there are clues from campaign filings that point to support from AIPAC's donor base. And this is where it really gets interesting, everyone. Around 31% of donors who gave at least $200 to Stevens' campaign also donated to AIPAC since the beginning of 2025. And the Stevens campaign has enjoyed a recent uptick in fees paid to Democracy Engine LLC, a donation processing platform that's also been used by, you guessed it, AIPAC. But despite all of this becoming public, Haley Stevens keeps supporting Israel's right-wing government, and she keeps supporting AIPAC, saying that she's not worried about being supported by millions from a group backing a genocidal government and a government that's working along with the Trump regime to engage in a war with Iran. Okay, well, she didn't say that part, but her actions are speaking louder than words. Stevens told the Detroit News that she's not breaking any FEC laws by taking this money, which is a funny answer considering how she's not celebrating that AIPAC is supporting her. She loves their money, but she's going to try to say it's really not a big deal. Let's not pay attention to it. Doesn't really sound like Haley's got a good answer as to why she's taking all this AIPAC cash now, does it? But she's going to keep taking the money. This is why. It's a major reason why she's getting large amounts of support from corporate establishment Democrats. So I read this column over the weekend in the Detroit Free Press by a man named Michael Griffey, who is an educator, attorney, and infrastructure executive. And according to the corporate Detroit Regional Chamber site, Michael Griffey is the Detroit Metro leader of AECOM, an American multinational infrastructure consulting firm. Interesting credentials. He also ran for Congress a couple of years ago, but lost as current congressman of the 13th District. Cryptocurrency flag Sri Tendahar won that primary and, of course, is now in Congress. Hopefully only for another few months, as progressive Donovan McKinney is taking him on in a primary race there. Anyway, Michael Griffey wrote how Michigan's Democratic U.S. Senate candidates, Haley Stevens, progressive and frontrunner Abdul Al-Sayed, and State Senator Mallory McMorrow must respond to black Michiganders and must respond to their needs. I agree with that, but I wanted to read more. And he described how Stevens is a moderate and incrementalist, and Democratic Party insiders really believe that she's the best person to face off against MAGA Republican and Trump waterboy and banker whore Florida Mike Rogers. I've heard that too. Never exactly get any kind of real explanation as to why that is the belief amongst party insiders and party donors. But Michael Griffey brings up how Stevens wants to strengthen Obamacare while costs are rising out of control thanks to Dear Leader and the insurance lobby. And he says that she also sponsored the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, as well as the Raise the Wage Act, guaranteeing a $17 minimum wage, which Griffey rightly notes is an issue with clear implications for black voters who are overrepresented in minimum wage jobs. 100% true. Nobody's arguing that. Yet those bills, I'll mention, those bills never passed, and I don't think they were ever supposed to be passed. I mean, that's leading me to believe that's why Haley Stevens sponsored those bills in the first place. Regardless, let's posit that Haley Stevens truly does want police reform and to raise the minimum wage. Griffey writes and notes, Stevens' approach reflects a broader philosophy, incremental change rather than sweeping disruption. This debate between gradualism and transformational reform has long shaped movements for racial justice from abolition to the civil rights era. He's right about that. And there has been this fight between gradualism and transformational change for marginalized Americans, including black Americans from the civil rights era. I'm reminded of how Dr. Martin Luther King only garnered a third of the country to support him and his civil rights causes in 1966. That's right, some 63% of Americans viewed Dr. King negatively at that time. Then I'm reminded of King's famous letter from Birmingham jail, in which he wrote, "I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the black American's great stumbling block in this stride towards freedom is not the white citizen's counselor or the Ku Klux Klanner, but the white moderate who is more devoted to order than justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice." That's always stuck with me. So the Democratic Party establishment has been filled with plenty of so-called smart moderates who will push for so-called incremental change while serving corporate interests rather than truly serving on behalf of working class Americans, the entire working class in this country. And now, in the age of the Trump regime and MAGA Republicans, a white Christian nationalist crusade, corporations, the same ones that Democrats bowed down to for decades, those corporations folded as they quickly scrapped their DEI programs as they were afraid of the Trump regime. And with the MAGA Republican Party in control of the White House, Congress, and the Supreme Court, they've been able to erase black majority districts throughout the South. And they're erasing black representation in Congress by taking a sledgehammer to the Voting Rights Act. So then I ask this question, where has this incrementalism really gotten us? Where? But then it's strange how these self-professed moderates not only accept plenty of corporate dollars, like from DTE in Michigan, but also from AIPAC, which doesn't serve Michiganders at all. And it doesn't serve particularly black Michiganders. Consider how the MAGA Republican so-called big beautiful bill, or the MAGA murder budget as I called it, consider how it gashed Medicaid, gashed Obamacare, gashed food stamps, and gashed other crucial working class programs. It was an all-out war on the working class, especially for marginalized Americans. And then consider how Trump and Elon gashed the federal workforce, which a healthy percentage are staffed by black workers. The MAGA murder budget is one of the greatest wealth redistribution bills ever, with all the wealth going up to the top, going up to the billionaire Epstein class and leaving the scraps for the rest of the working class. Let's not forget how in Michigan, we've got the RX Kids program that's helping many families, white, black, brown, and whatever religion from across the entire state, urban areas and rural areas. I mean, hell, the entire UP is getting covered by the RX Kids program. Yet state MAGA Republicans want to decimate that program as well because they view it all going to marginalized people. They view it going to black people. They view it going to brown people. They don't think that white people could ever benefit from these policies as well. Now, compare that with how many billions we've spent on Israel and its destruction and genocide in Gaza and its endless wars in the Middle East. Compare all that and think about that, because you know what? I really do believe Trump might want to get out of the Iran war, but he can't now. He can't. He's stuck. But I have a feeling Haley Stevens would like to see Trump get more involved in the Iran war, and since she is funded by the Extremist Political Action Committee known as AIPAC, I might not be that far off. Now, going back, consider the billions that we've wasted for Israel while Americans here are suffering. Working class programs, like I've already talked about, are being slashed. And you'll always hear from those, including from so-called moderate Democrats, how maybe we have to cut back our spending, how we have to worry about this nation's debt. And we just can't be spending all this money on the American working class. And we've got to cut spending on working class programs while enriching the billionaire Epstein class. Yet we never, ever hear that kind of talk when it comes to billions of dollars that we spend on Israel and the Middle East. When we pass bill after bill, giving billions of dollars to Israel, giving billions of dollars in defense weaponry to Israel, does anybody ever say in the political class, in the elite political class, do you ever hear anybody ever say, well, how are we going to pay for it? No, they only do that when it comes to the minimum wage. They only do that when it comes to Medicare for all. They only do that when it comes to child care for all. They never do it when it comes to their beloved Israel. Again, black Americans are being forgotten, and it's from people like Haley Stevens who might talk a big game about protecting black Michiganders, but their actions always say otherwise. They'd rather have our money go to Israel than helping Americans here, our working class here in Detroit, our working class in Lansing, our working class in Grand Rapids, our working class in the UP, our working class everywhere around the state. It's always about funneling more money to Israel. Thankfully, many voters have finally picked up on that. I really wish, by the way, that Haley Stevens would maybe for once see Michigan in her dreams rather than a foreign country in her dreams. You're listening to LOL.
bringing progressivism with passion each and every week. It's Left of Lansing with Pat Johnston. Follow us on Blue Sky, Twitter, Facebook, and the Gram. Subscribe to the show wherever you listen to your podcasts, and subscribe to us on YouTube. We'd also like to thank Audio Boom for publishing the show and helping us spread our populist, progressive, and patriotic message. Speaking of which, let's get back to the show with Pat.
leftoflansing@gmail.com is the best way to reach me if you'd like. And let me tell you, if you need a break and a good laugh, and a good laugh that's very Michigan-centric or Monroe, Michigan-centric, just go online. I know many of you have probably watched it already, but if you haven't, go online and watch Stephen Colbert's appearance on Monroe's public access TV show a day after he aired his final Late Show appearance on CBS. It was really good. Jack White, Eminem, Jeff Daniels all appear on the show. It's really worth your hour of watching it. And I'm glad I decided to spend an hour away from the world just to watch it. And I have to say, I hope Colbert appears on that show every once in a while. It's really, really good. But yeah, we need to laugh, don't we? We all need it. You know what we don't need is another one of those Detroit Chamber Mackinac conferences on Mackinac Island. During the Monday Musing this week, I think I called it a corporate hand job for Michigan politicians. Perhaps a better metaphor would have been a corporate reach around. I don't know. Now, I know it's not on the same scale what I'm about to tell you, but when I used to be in farm radio years and years and years ago, the network I work for in Lansing would literally get paid to help cover all kinds of events for the Michigan Farm Bureau and the American Farm Bureau and their annual meetings. But those meetings, they are always, always, always corporate-friendly meetings. But I did at least understand early that the Michigan Farm Bureau and Farm Bureau in general and Farm Bureau across the country is a heavy hitter and a political force, even though family farms continue to disappear. The Michigan Farm Bureau fought against the state's new clean energy law that was passed when Democrats had the trifecta back in 2024, and they especially wanted to fight that part of the law that allowed farmers to allow their lands to be used for wind and solar power. Now, of course, that money would go on to save family farms, to save some family farms at least, but Farm Bureau was strangely against it and said that it took power out of local communities. It doesn't do that completely anyway, but what it did do was stop the oil and gas industry using its wealth and influence to scare local governments of clean energy. Sounds a little familiar with data centers nowadays, doesn't it? Anyway, the Michigan Farm Bureau annual meeting that we would always attend for the network I used to work for years ago, it was a corporate event, and our job as quote-unquote reporters was to disseminate the corporate lines. So it shouldn't shock you. I really couldn't live with myself, especially since our network really didn't talk much with or reach out to other groups like the Michigan Farmers Union. And looking back, I'd really dreaded those corporate meetings and those countless other corporate shindigs in big agriculture that I had to attend and quote-unquote cover, so I did not last long there whatsoever. Well, that's what the Mackinac Policy Conference essentially is on a much bigger and wider scale. It's corporate forces meeting and greeting with politicians from Lansing, which is, I guess business as usual. And it's put on by the corporate-friendly Detroit Regional Chamber, which is probably still mired in a collective depression since its dear buddy and pal, former Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan, withdrew his so-called independent run for the governor's seat last week. I never understood what Duggan was trying to do since he was promising more of the same in Lansing with corporations driving policy. And yet at the same time, he was trying to argue that he was an independent and a centrist. So what he was really saying was, I will promise more of the same. There was nowhere for him to go. People don't want the same. They are tired of where Michigan has been going. It's no wonder why his campaign collapsed and had no support. And you know what? Perhaps saying that he loved more data centers in Michigan, maybe that didn't seem to really resonate with the working class there, Mike. Now, everyone was slapping each other on the back up on the island this week when Governor Gretchen Whitmer signed a $152 million bill to upgrade runways at the Selfridge Air National Guard base in Macomb County. That's on top of the $792 million in federal funds the Trump regime is directing to that base. You remember when Governor Whitmer hid her face behind her folder at Dear Leader's Oval Office, right? Well, that was one of the main things that she and MAGA State House Speaker and man-baby Matt Hall wanted to talk to him about, and that they were pushing Dear Leader to give them money for the Selfridge Air National Base. And according to Michigan Advance's Ben Solis, the bill, passed bipartisanly, of course, is a spending item that was critical to getting the impending F-15 fighter jets. So Whitmer, Hall, and MAGA Republicans and Democrats applauded the bill signing on the island as a big step forward for Michigan. Now, of course, this National Guard base, yeah, it is important to Macomb County. No one's arguing that. Without it, it would hurt that area's economy, as well as the state's overall economy, which is struggling mightily, big time. But I guess that's what I find a little ironic, if that's the right term. We've got the Trump regime and its white Christian nationalists gutting crucial parts of the United States government that, helps the working class, that helps the country, right? You'll hear regime figures say that cutting government jobs, thousands of them, by the way, is better in the long run because then people can get jobs in the private sector. Now, of course, they'll have a tough time getting jobs with AI taking over, but I digress. But then here we are. We're celebrating the government spending around $750 million, and then the state government will pour in another $150 to create and to keep jobs in Macomb County. Wait a second. I thought that government jobs were bad. But who says government can't or doesn't create jobs, right? But of course, when it comes to defense spending, hey, we're always about that. But like I said last year, there was no way Trump wasn't going to authorize this money. He won Michigan, and Macomb County was a big reason as to why. He was always going to okay the money for the Selfridge Air Base. And you know what? I guess that's still better than one of the other bills I remember Whitmer signing on Mackinac Island, that bipartisan bill that received high fives from the insurance lobby. Yeah, when Governor Whitmer in 2019 signed that failed and catastrophic auto insurance reform bill into law, I'll never forget that, and I think that was one of her lowest moments. Anyway, so they were able to sign a bill and all congratulate each other on giving over $150 million for upgrades at Selfridge. But other than that, the whole Mackinac Policy Conference is filled with panels trying to figure out how to turn around a state that's struggling thanks to long-failed corporate centrist policies that decimated the working class. And on top of that, Michigan's dealing with the tariff-crazy Trump regime. But these corporate types, they say the same thing always at this conference. They're telling us that we need both parties to get along. Why can't they just get along and work on behalf of corporations? I mean, imagine sticking up with that. Imagine sticking up with how both parties just have to get along while fascism is taking over America. One party does not want to get along. One party wants true authoritarianism. How do you work with that? Now, the Detroit Regional Chamber did a poll that it conducted with the help of the Glengarriff people, showing how Michigan really ranks compared with other states economically versus the perception of Michigan's economy with Michiganders. For instance, according to that poll, respondents said Michigan ranked around 26th in proficient reading, when Michigan really ranks 44th in the nation. Respondents thought Michigan ranked 27th in personal income when that number is really 40th. Wait a second. You mean to tell me that handing out over $1 billion for charter schools, the Flint water crisis, keeping Michigan's regressive flat tax, defunding public schools, gutting unions, and shelling out billions in corporate welfare didn't help the state at all? I'm shocked. I'm stunned. But what is this Detroit Regional Chamber Mackinac Policy Conference going to do about it? Like everything else, nothing. I saw how many of the gubernatorial candidates were taking questions from the press, and it's being reported that no one there was talking about affordability. But then I thought, well, wait a second. Why would they want to talk about affordability? Do you think everyone up there at that conference thinks about affordability? Nah. Which is why I was glad to read how Democratic Attorney General Dana Nessel and Progressive Democratic House Representatives Carrie Ryan-Gans, Aaron Bernes, and Betsy Kafia didn't go to that Mackinac conference. Nessel said at a press conference earlier in the week here, she said, "I'm not saying that nothing positive happens on the island, but that there's also a lot of corruption that takes place up there as well. What I mean by that is the sort of quid pro quos that sometimes culminate in us not having very good policies in our state." I wholeheartedly agree with that. Nessel, Ryan-Gans, Bernes, and Kofia also talked about how Michigan still remains one of the least transparent states in the nation. We still can't get Freedom of Information Act bills passed here in the state to ensure that the state legislature and the governor's office are subject to FOIA laws. Yeah, they're not right now. Isn't that convenient? Oh, and Democrats, though, they had the chance to pass some FOIA bills when they still had the trifecta in the latter weeks of 2024. But then House Speaker Joe Tate tabled the bill in favor of a bill granting massive tax breaks for big tech bro data centers. And that's the same Joe Tate, by the way, who's backing Haley Stevens, just saying. But while corporate and government corruption reigns supreme on Mackinac Island, back in the state's capital in Lansing, the working class is taking matters into its own hands. As Michigan Advance's Catherine Daly reports, the Michiganders for Money Out of Politics ballot petition campaign gathered outside the Michigan Bureau of Elections on Wednesday to turn in over 562,000 signatures to put a proposal on the November ballot to ban utility companies and government contractors from making campaign contributions. Wow, what a juxtaposition, right? Yeah, I'd say the working class is in a populist mood. Michigan is in a populist mood. This is the working class coming together and taking control of their own political futures. They're tired of letting DTE and consumers and Blue Cross and Blue Shield call the shots. If the establishment, Democratic and MAGA Republicans, won't do anything to curb all this corporate influence in Lansing, well, then the working class will step up to end it. Now, we will wait to hear if the signatures are valid, of course, but since Mop-Up Michigan organizers turned in more than needed, I think it's headed to the ballot for working-class Michiganders to pass, and it will pass by wide margins. Again, what a juxtaposition this week. Political elites surrounded by corporate donors are whining and dining on Mackinac Island, living it up, while working-class Michiganders are fighting back against the greed that we're seeing happening all week long on Mackinac Island this week. You are listening to LOL.
A working class voice for the working class. It's Left of Lansing with Pat Johnston. If you'd like to tell Pat what you think of the show and maybe even congratulate him for providing podcasting excellence, oh brother, email him at leftoflansing@gmail.com. If you have an idea for a guest or a topic for a future show, email him at leftoflansing@gmail.com. We'd like to thank you for listening and for helping spread the progressive message in the Mitten State and beyond. Now, here's Pat Johnston.
I just wanted to say that I get why all of the Democratic Senate and gubernatorial candidates are on Mackinac Island this week since debates were being held there. However, if I were Dr. Abdul or Mallory McMorrow or Jocelyn Benson, I think I would have head up there for the debates, but then gone elsewhere quickly for campaigning. I mean, no one's impressed by that stupid conference anymore, which is why passing the Mop-Up Michigan proposal, if it does indeed go to the ballot this fall, will make such an event useless, and that will be something to celebrate. I know Dr. Abdul is moving on to campaign in northern Michigan over the weekend and the Upper Peninsula, and I'm sure, like he has elsewhere across the state, I'm sure that he'll bring in the crowds up there, no doubt about it. Speaking of northern Michigan, I'm going to be spending the next few weeks covering the UP and northern Lower Peninsula here on the show. Next week, I'll talk with Dr. Jeffrey Insko from the Substack called The Current, as we'll talk about the latest surrounding the Line 5 pipeline, as we'll talk about the latest surrounding the Line 5 pipeline that's still operating under the Straits of Mackinac, right where that conference is taking place, by the way. Then the week after, Progressive State Representative Betsy Confe from the 103rd State House District, which comprises of Leelanau, Benzie, and Traverse counties, will join us to talk about a bunch of topics, including the Mop-Up Michigan efforts, since Representative Confe has been trying to push through FOIA reform for Michigan. She despises how Michigan is one of the least transparent governments in the union. Then, after that, we'll be talking with Progressive State Senate candidate and current Delta County board member Kelly Van Ginhoven about her exciting race in the Democratic Party for Senate District 38 in the UP. And then, Progressive candidate for the Democratic primary in Michigan's first congressional seat that's currently being held by Louisiana Jack Bergman, Kyle Blomquist returns to the show so we can catch up with his awesome campaign as well. And then, okay, well, that'll do it for the UP, as I'm planning on talking for I think it will be the last week of June. I'll be talking with a member from Michigan's chapter of the Working Families Party, which has just been on fire here lately, winning elections throughout the country, and which has also just endorsed Dr. Abdul Al-Sayed's Senate race, William Lawrence's House race in the 7th District around Lansing, and also, of course, Rashida Tlaib in Detroit. So that's the month of June, and I'm looking forward to it. And believe it or not, we're almost just 2 months away from primary day, which will be here before we know it. Before we move on to the last call, I just wanted to thank everyone for their comments after my show last week with Ottawa County progressive activist Joe Spalding. Look, I understand Joe has rubbed some of you the wrong way, and as you heard, me say many times, I've gotten into some skirmishes with Joe on the socials of late, especially when it comes to the direction of the Democratic Party. However, I was and I am still surprised when Joe announced on the show that he's backing William Lawrence's progressive campaign for Michigan's 7th Congressional District, and William's campaign just continues to pick up more and more steam. And it's scaring the hell out of the corporate establishment Democratic Party here in Michigan. Now, I may not agree with Joe some of the times on how best to make Democrats not just win elections, but how to serve on behalf of the working class. But look, I'm sorry, I don't think Joe's a dummy, and he knows Michigan politics. And for that reason alone, my door will always be open to have Joe right here on the show sharing his opinions. We don't always have to agree on everything. That's what makes us non-MAGA. We're not a cult. So again, thank you for all of your comments. The Left of Lansing web poll this week is, what grade would you give Governor Gretchen Whitmer's second term? You can vote on Left of Lansing's YouTube and Twitter pages and also on my Patreon page. I'll give you my grade next week and you might be surprised. Or you might not be. Time now for the Left of Lansing last call. So it's been a while since I've covered this topic, and the topic is tourism. You know, tourism, one of the major moneymakers here in the state of Michigan. I'll never forget a science teacher I had back in high school who talked about Michigan's natural resources and rich environment. You know, so we've got all the lakes, rivers, streams, forests, hiking trails, fishing shorelines, and yes, the entire up north, which for those of us in Redford Township, I think that meant anywhere north of Pine Knob. But I'll always remember him asking us to always take note of all of the Ohio license plates in Michigan during the summer, because it just shows you there's nothing to do in Ohio except watch Buckeyes football, I guess, and watch old WKRP episodes. And I'm not ripping on WKRP. That show rocked. I am ripping on Ohio State football. Okay, well, there might be more to Ohio than just that. But hold on real quick. There's breaking news as I'm recording this right now, and let me just find it here. It says that Ohio Republican Governor Mike DeWine just placed a pause on further tax exemptions for data centers. Wow. According to Signal Ohio, it says here in 2024, the state sales tax exemption for data centers cost Ohio around $555 million in revenue, 4 times more than the State Department of Taxation forecasted. And then in 2005, it cost a whopping $1.6 billion, 11 times more than the original estimate of $136 million. Wow. So that's why Governor Mike DeWine wants to place a pause on further tax exemptions for data centers. Hey, not bad there. Wouldn't it be nice if our governor here in Michigan would just follow suit? Anyway, tourism, right? Yeah, tourism. Important here for Michigan and important for the nation. But this story from the Irish Times, of all places, caught my attention, and it helps lead us to the conclusion that the Trump regime is hurting this country. It says, according to CNN, which referenced tourism data from mobile tracking company Cubic, Canadian travel to major U.S. cities may have plummeted by as much as 42% over the past year. 42%. This figure indicates a much sharper decline than the original estimate of 25% reduction in border crossings. Canadian travel down 42% from last year. Unreal. And the Mirror reports that travelers are citing President Donald Trump's rhetoric, hardline policies, and the political turmoil surrounding the war in Iran as reasons for avoiding U.S. visits. Isn't that just nice? So the war in Iran is now hurting tourism here in the United States and in Michigan. I mean, just like the stupid and illegal Iran war, or protecting all those pedophiles within the Epstein class, or creating a $1.7 billion reparations for all of those white January 6th insurrectionists. This didn't have to happen. But dear leader decided to attack and impose extreme tariffs on Canada, and then he stupidly declared that Canada would be the 51st state. Now it's Venezuela, I guess, maybe Cuba, who knows. I guess it's no surprise that according to a recent Politico poll, it shows that Canadians are far more likely than Europeans to identify the U.S. ahead of Russia as a threat to global peace. Well, when they're right, they're right. And the Spartan News reports how Visit Detroit says that Canadian travel through Detroit dropped by 30% last year. And there's been a 5 to 6% drop in international tourism in the United States over the past year. That's compared to an increase of international travel by 5%. Ugh. The Trump regime is hurting Michigan in a variety of ways. And guess what, everyone? Tourism is just another way.
You're listening to Left of Lansing. Music for the show and everything else on Left of Lansing is provided by Wanderbeats. To hear the latest project and complete music archives, check out Space Leopard on your favorite streaming site or subscribe to Space Leopard on YouTube. Now, back to our favorite progressive voice in Michigan. It's Pat Johnston.
Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the Left of Lansing. You can always follow me on my socials, join up and follow Left of Lansing also on Patreon. And you can contact me on leftoflansing@gmail.com. Coming up next week, we'll talk Line 5 with Dr. Jeffrey Insko from The Current, which is a terrific place to learn all you have to learn about the fight to shut down the Line 5 Canadian pipeline in the Straits of Mackinac. Looking forward to that next week. Thanks again for all of your kind words, and thanks for all your support. And please help spread the message of Michigan's premier progressive podcast and all of our Michigan progressive podcasters by sharing clips and episodes to as many people as possible. That's the best way to connect with so many other progressives and so many like-minded independents throughout the state of Michigan. And guess what? The next time we'll talk, it'll be June. Wow. Until then, remember, take the battle to them. Thank you, Michigan!
You've been listening to Left of Lansing with Pat Johnston. Left of Lansing was produced by Pat Johnston, brainstormed by Pat Johnston, researched by Pat Johnston, written by Pat Johnston, edited by Pat Johnston, and yes, hosted by Pat Johnston. Technical assistance by Dr. Heather. Thanks to our good friend Rich for website assistance, and thanks to our good friend Kirsten for the awesome podcast logo. We thank Audio Boom for publishing the podcast every week. Visit leftoflansing.com for more news and information. Thanks again for listening to Michigan's premier progressive podcast, and we'll talk with you again next week.